Hello and welcome to another episode of the Cockerel cast. I'm Jason Thompson, current Edinburgh Northern member, and I'm joined as usual by Michael Mawdsley. How are you, Michael?
I'm excellent, thank you very much. How are you?
I'm very well, thanks. And joining both of us for episode 4 is a man who goes nowhere without his plastic Edinburgh rugby tumbler, safely tucked into an iconic pair of cargo shorts. As much a fan of the high alpine slopes as he is bent double on a muddy Inverleith Park pitch, the man who keeps the bunker stocked with a fine selection of bottled beers as well as many a Northerners' fridges currently, it's Kit Walker. Welcome, Kit. How are you this evening?
Very well, thank you, Jason.
Drag that one out a wee bit for you.
I'm doing very nicely, thank you very much. I've had a lovely day with my girls. They've been behaving themselves. I'm slightly disappointed to see Michael's shaved his moustache off on the weekend that he was rocking briefly.
I've been left with a permanent scar on my eyebrow though to make up for it, Kit. So that's
Yeah, I can see that from here, Michael. I can see that.
Very good. So we're expecting something impressive from this first answer. What have you got to drink?
Tonight I am double pot. I'm currently drinking one of Michael's local Barney's brew, which is the 000, which is their Belgian-inspired decent stuff. I've got a little whiskey on the go as well. One of these guys, which was a gift on fellow Northerners, Gollum and Jamie Kindness.
Nice. Good. Of course, I've had to go for a Williams for the occasion, a Birds and Bees.
Solid choice.
And Michael?
I am drinking a large Hydron Colada, which is a pina colada pale from 71 Brewing in Dundee. So we'll see how that goes.
Lovely. Only one?
Yeah, I've got a couple sitting here. So there's no whiskey this evening. I'm currently off whiskey.
Change times. So firstly, Kit,
I can't imagine why.
Yeah, your lockdown situation, how are you managing?
I'm doing all right. I'm in a position where I am still working 2 days a week, but that's mostly because I have 2 little girls to look after, and the school's being shut, and prioritising my significant other's work with the NHS mental health departments. We decided to let her go to work more and me go to work less just now.
Slightly more important, I suppose, the NHS work than the big.
What is more important to the mental health, like psychological counselling or alcohol delivery? I mean, let's be honest.
I think that depends who you ask.
Indeed. Yeah, go.
Excellent,
Michael, I think you're a wee note there.
Yeah, so I presume that basically everyone kind of knows what you do for a living, Kit. But do you want to expand on that maybe for someone who doesn't know, perhaps?
For those who don't know, I work in alcohol distribution. I work for an Edinburgh-based wine and beer wholesaler, mostly supplying bars and restaurants in the before times, currently doing home deliveries. The company's called Great Grog, run by the very wonderful, excellent rugby supporter Richard Meadows, who other people in the Edinburgh rugby community might know. I gather yourselves probably do not.
Excellent. Well, I had a quick 2 questions about kind of your work, I suppose, just to kind of open with an icebreaker. What is the most interesting or weird order you've delivered? And that's broken into 2 categories. One is of all time, and one is since the lockdown started.
I don't know, you have to give me a second on that. What is the weirdest thing I've delivered? Recently, I've had everything. I've been to some of Edinburgh's most salubrious and scummiest addresses, and there is no way of telling, depending on the address, of what they buy and what they drink. I've been to some multi-million-pound houses delivering the cheapest stuff, and some very suspicious flats with some very good wine. So there's nothing in that. You can't read that. Of all time, just trying to think what is the strangest places I've been. I mean, Grog's taken me all over a lot of Scotland, quite honestly. I've done wedding deliveries to the borders, the Highlands, several trips to Glasgow. I'm just trying to think of weird. How would I go weird?
I don't know, maybe...
Sorry, nothing hilarious to think of there. Sorry, I'm trying to think what I was
That's
saying.
all right. We do also have a live question from at outgoing_captain, which is applicable to the lockdown. He's asked, which Northerner has ordered the most booze from Great Grog since the lockdown started?
There was at least one gent who's now on first name terms with my boss. That would be Mr. Hardman. Hello, Neil. The outgoing captain, unfortunately, neither him nor his wife answer their phone enough when you're trying to do their delivery. They both put you on ignore and then just have to come back the next day. So that's slightly disappointing. Other repeat customers, Michael, I believe you're trying to join our wine club, which I have been meaning to get around to.
I am waiting for that email.
It's on my to-do list. I'm just not in the office enough to actually go up on that.
That's all right.
Great stuff. So we'll briefly touch on your backstory, Kit. Where are you from and how did you end up down in the lovely Stockbridge?
Sure. So I'm born and raised in Jersey, Channel Islands. I started playing rugby there. I don't know, under sevens, under eights, something long time ago. I honestly can't remember where I first picked up a ball, but so yeah, born in Jersey, went to boarding school in England, a school some of you in the rugby community might have heard of, called Rugby School, little place in Warwickshire. Came to Edinburgh to go to university, and here I met my wonderful significant other, Jennifer, who is somewhere. And I basically haven't left since. I've had a few stints away, a little bit working in Europe, a little bit of travelling, but I've basically been in Edinburgh since '99.
Very good. So you mentioned you played a wee bit on Jersey there, and obviously,
Yep.
presumably at rugby school. You would have had previous clubs then before you found Edinburgh Northern. Any of note?
First adult rugby was in Jersey immediately after finishing school for the United Banks and latterly Kennevay, names which I'm sure mean nothing to you, but were big in the Channel Island rugby circles. Very much in the northern mould of having their own dilapidated clubhouses, if at all, and boys who like to social. That's kind of what set me up for a future career at Northern. I then played, basically I played for teams with an Edinburgh prefix, Edinburgh University to academicals to Edinburgh Northern. That was my slightly circuitous route.
Excellent. So would there have been any representative rugby or trophies of note during that time?
Well, as much as I want to talk about my Jersey under-13s victory over Guernsey in the early 90s, there's the other one which doesn't take long for me to tell anyone else about, which was my brief international career, shall we say, which I've got just out shocking. I put down one of the shirts. This is my India shirt from the 2007 World Cup qualifiers, actually worn in a match against Kazakhstan, I think.
Fantastic.
That is tremendous.
Well
prepared and no smugs at all.
I wasn't quite sure whether to wear that shirt or this one for the interview. But I went with the classic Northern tour shirt.
So, obviously, it's quite an interesting kind of topic, kind of international qualification, the residency laws and so on. How did you manage to qualify for India? My grandfather was born and I wouldn't say raised, but it was a couple of years, honestly, in Calcutta. He then moved to Britain and actually moved back to, well, not moved back to India, but actually was in India at the end of his life as well. So he almost went full circle. He died there as well, but it was more of a holiday than a permanent move. But the, shall we say, the international connection is one of these things that honestly just came from pop conversation, whereby I was playing at university with a chap, Mr. Andy Cook, who's had a cousin who had started playing for Belgium, which obviously was a very interesting thing to bring up in a quiet Tuesday afternoon drinking session.
which just led me thinking, because I also have a granny born in Belgium on the other side of the family. So next time I see an older brother, I bring up the international conversation about, oh, I've got a mate who started playing, mate of a mate who started playing for Belgium. Do you think we stand a shot? And he goes, well, we might, but Belgium are currently, as we were at the time, 25th, 30th in the world, somewhere around that mark. But on the other side of the family, Granddad was born in Calcutta, in India. And India are currently 75th in the world. So possibly a slightly easier team to get into.
Excellent. There's another live question from @LittleLawyer, which is which is the more professional setup, the Indian national team or Edinburgh Northern?
I mean, honestly, there are a couple of similarities. They both play in public parks in the middle of the major city. In India, they were based out of Mumbai when I was there. I believe their head offices still are. But the club where we trained was literally on the end of base equivalent of the meadows. So public paths crisscrossing it. I want to say an older clubhouse, but it was slightly more salubrious. Think more verandas and spinning ceiling fans when you're sitting outside and a little bell to ring for the beer wallet to come along.
Oh.
So then you obviously, or at least I think you followed Finn and Barry over the wall, swam the pond, climbed the hill, and saw the light in a leafy corner of Inverness Park. Is that how you learned about the best club ever?
I have to admit, I had played against you boys a couple of times in the past. I don't recall too many of the current players being in those matches. We're talking late 2000s, Edinburgh Ackies, 3s or 4s against your seconds. I remember giving Big French Jeff a couple of pushes in the scrums, but mostly because I knew him from the other side of the bar drinking in King's Club. So that was a face I recognised.
Very good.
But I certainly knew you boys weren't shy of a beer afterwards, which I have to admire. Having come from a setup where more and more of the youngsters were drinking Lucasades and less of the boys were having a couple of pints afterwards. So after a couple of years of the Ackies 3s, 4s set up, a few boys getting older, a few boys moving on, when someone suggested come over to Northern, they like a beer afterwards, I was like, I think I found my people. I think this is where I should be.
Well
and
done.
that was, as mentioned, Mr. Barry O'Day and Mr. Finn Pritchard. Yeah.
Indeed. I think we've done well out of Ackies, way back to even Drew Chapman. I think even Cammy Ritchie might have as well. So it's good to sort of feed off the scraps the whole time. Not that I'm calling you scraps, of course. What would you say is your Northern experience to date? You've played 1s, 2s, gents so far?
I'm the kind of guy who is, when I play for the 1s, I'm often the oldest guy on the team, and I have been for a couple of years. But when I get to play for the gents, I get to feel like a youngster again. I'm at home in the 2nds or the 1st or the gents, and often multiple matches in the same day, which is a terrible idea at my age. That was one of my last ones a couple of months ago, it seems now, where I went off from the gents game against the French touring side straight into a 1s league fixture. That almost broke me, but came out the other end.
Excellent. And what would you say is Northern's USP if you had to pick one?
Northern, I've got a lot of love for in terms of being a traditional rugby club, in as much that in the nicest possible way, I'd love to support children's rugby and women's rugby, etc., but we're in an area saturated by them. Therefore, we are, as Northern, we're a club with 2 teams regularly, who like an end of season tour, who like a social function, who like a few beers afterwards. That is, as simple as that sounds, is actually quite rare these days.
Exactly. No, it is. it doesn't need to be difficult. The answer to that question, and quite simply put, I think you've got it right there. And would there be anything? Would there be anything from your other experiences of other clubs that you think Northern could change about their own to make an improvement somewhere?
That if it helps you, if it helps you that the kind of the previous guests that we've had on, two of them gave us answers which were kind of around, I suppose, facilities. So Dom had suggested new Prosecco glasses. Ben Glasgow requested a karaoke machine, and Spills told the party line of committee and didn't really give a yes or no answer. So that's the standard that you're at in terms of what you'd change or maybe what you'd bring in.
Well, having previously mentioned the wonderful clubhouses in Bombay, the Bombay Gymkhana Club, I do miss a little silver bell to ring for the beer wallet to just come and take beers to my table and just add them to my tab. That could be an improvement, but I think it'd be a hard sell to set up.
We'll get Callum onto that, yeah. So to date then, have you a favourite game that you've played in or tournament that you've been involved in?
I have never had the physique or the skills to be a sevens player, but I've enjoyed every Northern Sevens tournament I've been involved in. I think did someone touch on it the other week on one of your podcasts about the game where the presidents played the first team. That was a lovely afternoon, if only because it was the site of my only Northern drop goal to date. Successful. That's what I think. But even even more recent ones, even when I'm not playing, it's just a nice place to be on a sunny April afternoon or a rainy April afternoon or just generally an April afternoon. So tournaments, I'm going to go with the Northern Sevens in its various guises. Individual matches, let's see. Last year's unfortunate semi-final loss, despite the scoreline, was a hell of an occasion on a great day. One of the biggest crowds I've played in since the 4 times my previous rugby career, shall we say. It's nice to see a big crowd down, lovely support, and it was the one that got away. Let's see, other favourites. One of the things I actually quite like about the league that the 1s and 2s are in is how local a lot of the opposition are. In terms of, you're not just seeing a whole bunch of brand new faces as you go on a road trip another couple of hours across Scotland every week. So it's nice to build up some rivalries in terms of front row banter with the opposition, in terms of collisions with some of the bigger boys in the packs, as I enjoy making and hitting. So to come back to the same faces and to put the same victories, narrow losses, or whatever results, knowing who the opposition are, is a nice thing. So I'm going to say I'll probably beating Dalkeith a couple of years ago. It was a lovely one.
It's always quite nice to beat Dalkeith. It's quite interesting you've brought up the fact that you obviously play against the same front rows week in, week out. There is another live question from @Pride of Yorkshire, who's asked, who is the best prop in East Free?
Are we discussing inclusive of Northern or opposition? So
I suppose it's entirely up to yourself. If you happen to think the best prop in East Free plays for us, then I suppose it's up to you. Or maybe it's been more interesting to know who your favourite opponent to play against is then.
Let's go. So you're going to have to edit out some of these pauses. I'm just going to take a think for a second.
I think contemplation's absolutely fine.
Would potentially @Pride of Yorkshire be one of these standout players in East 3?
Taking a small guess as to who that relates to, I possibly would have said a couple of years ago, before a significant string of injuries and unexplained weight loss, that he would have been in that category, but I'm not sure he's strung enough games together recently to merit that title anymore.
Well done.
Excellent.
We'll let you think about that. Obviously, you mentioned the semi-final there. I remember an absolute peach of a try came from Max, a nice, lovely looping pass out to Crawford, who caught it and scored. And you've managed to work your way over the try line enough times yourself. Are there any tries which stand out to you, yours or others?
Yeah, I guess like last couple of years, the ones that really stand out were I came on as a sub in the game against South Queensbury during that sideways storm that was on their 3G pitch. I don't know if those of you both playing on that one.
Both of your hosts actually appeared as a sub alongside you.
Yes, thank you for reminding. We were 7-0 down, and I absolutely did score that try in the post, despite what the protestations from their defence were. So that gave us the draw, and it was a very satisfying moment in terms of a game that we should have won quite comfortably, but just the conditions were god awful. So I'm going to go that one from memory, and on my Northern debut for the seconds, I managed to bag 2 tries, so that must be why I'm held in some regard in the club. I'm not quite sure why. One of which just fell into my hands. I sort of fall over the line. But the second one, I had to do a little bit of work.
Well, I'd actually point out that in terms of kind of mobile props that I've witnessed, kind of making yards and scoring from distance, that tends to be one of your specialities. Like you do tend to go. It's quite funny. We had Spills on at the weekend, and he was talking about how he tends to only score from 5 or 6 yards, whereas I've seen you barrel through players from 22 metres out to score. So it's an interesting attribute to have for a prop, is that mobility. Even as you move into the kind of towards the end of your career, that's how I'm going to say it. I was going to say twilight, but it's not the twilight because you've still got many years in you. So.
Well, I've always had a very different tactical plan from Spills in terms of avoiding or going straight for contact. There is a slight size difference, I will admit, which I do have in my favour. But yeah, I'm not shy of a hit. I love taking the ball into contact, and whether I make 2 yards or 20, it's rarely more than that, let's be honest. Someone else will catch me. I'm very happy to do so. I like playing with some good scrum halves and some good back row guys who can feed me when I know when to hang off 2 phases and come in on the third one, for example. You get your likes of Barry Adair or Spills himself, who can see that coming, who can build a phase, and then throw and hit and then recycle or score.
I would completely agree. Despite being a back, obviously quite a lot of my tries tend to come from about 5 metres out, and I've benefited profusely from both Barry and Spills firing those passes to me. Actually, I can remember back-to-back games about 5 years ago against Liberton and Trinity. Spills 1 week and Barry the next, just popping it up for me to score. So they definitely do add a certain degree of character.
Well done. So off the pitch then, have you best Northern night out that you've been on or tour that you've headed away on?
I've got a lot of love for the Croatia tour of a couple of years ago. That was split in mid-May, where the weather was just right. The standard of rugby was a little above our level of sobriety, but it was more of a boys' weekend than it was at all. Almost there was time on the beach, there was time in the clubs, which is really not honestly my scene anymore. But I just had a hell of a time, and I'm also aware that I'm still owed fines from Tour Court for having left that tour a day early. So as much as I should bring that up, yeah, I'm not scared. Fine, bring it on. I'm supposed to go on tour next weekend in Bratislava, and we're not going to be there, so I might as well mention it now. Might forget about it by next year.
I'm not sure they will have.
I hope you have a decent excuse though, because I do remember one Northerner who left Rotterdam 2010 basically because he had to go home and sign papers for a divorce.
I'm going opposite end of the scale. I was going to a very good friend of mine's wedding the next day, so I made it and I got back on it at the wedding, and that was a struggle, but I managed as well.
Obviously, Jason touched on a bit there about nights out at the club, and you've obviously mentioned your love of a social beer. You're quite a big name when it comes to nights out at the club. You tend to be at the centre of the action. I can actually remember my engagement party where you managed to, with a couple of other culprits who won't be named on here, to demolish an entire box of Mellish cheese as part of the wine club. Do you have a particularly favourite Northern night out from your time at the club?
Oh, anything involving wine and cheese club is it's an excellent night. I mean, it's a select group of gentlemen, a club within a club, if you will. Let's think. My first season, last club dinner, end of season club dinner. I remember winning a bottle of Morgan's, I want to say Morgan's Spice in the raffle in the pre-dinner drinks section, and I honestly don't remember the rest of that night.
I was at your table.
Yeah, I've got vague memories of no cutlery eating, and I remember treating this bottle of rum as if it were a bottle of port, and no one was allowed to put it down until it was finished, and then that's all I got. Other nights, I'm honestly, this is another one I'm going to expose myself on, despite being with you boys for a couple of years now. I'm still actually yet to do a bus journey as an away match. As part of the consequence of myself working Saturday mornings, which means I often couldn't make a lot of the long away matches, so I've had to play the local game instead. So the closest I got to that was a train journey back on the Borders Railway back from Galashiels, involving making your own clothes out of bin bags that you had to rock for the rest of the train journey, and a bit of a sing-song and a few sherbets.
Yeah, I remember that that train journey actually quite well. That was one of the riskier bin bag clothing examples I've seen, given the fact that we were very much in public and there was about 5 or 6 of you having to crawl along the train in bin bags, half clothed. So impressive that we managed to avoid some kind of police incident. So you've talked about tour, you've talked about nights out. You've obviously done a lot of kind of, I wouldn't call it personal touring, but touring in your time. I know a lot of the club are actually in awe of you as you travelled around Japan during the World Cup, which was very impressive. More so, actually, you took it upon yourself to babysit our very own Wilson Craig, which ensured not only his safety, but you also averted a major diplomatic incident. I feel Wilson untethered in Japan could have been a bit too much for Northern relations. So the question I wanted to ask was, if you had to pick one Northerner to travel abroad with, who would it be and why?
So Wilson is the kind of guy, when he gets on it, he gets on it. And that makes for some interesting situations. So if I'm actually going to choose a Northerner, can I choose like the quietest one of the youngsters who doesn't speak, who's just going to shut up and sit at the back and not lead me into trouble? Or do I take an absolute beer monster to try and keep up with me?
I mean, we would never prejudice your answer, but in terms of our following ratings and content value, maybe pick a beer monster.
Well, a few of the boys who came, we went down to Newcastle last year for the Champions Cup final. So I'll take any of the boys from that touring party, which consists of Mr. Candlish, Colin Bryans, Gollum, Paul Holland, Farman Dan. Who else was in that group? But yeah, that was a hearty train journey involving a lot of cheese and wine, several stops at the Chinese restaurants, several kebabs. Yeah, that was good touring crew.
Well done. You've mentioned a few front rowers there. So if you were to put yourself in an ideal Northern front row, who would you select as your hooker and presumably loose head?
Yeah, like I said, I've mostly played tight head for Northern, but there was a time where I mostly saw myself as an overweight second row. So I'm going to move myself back into the second row and I'm going to go for a full front row.
Okay.
In which case, as much as I love booing around the rest of the park, his scrummaging needs a bit of work. So I'm going to go with the artist formerly known as Big John, in his Big John days, as opposed to his current days on the loose head side. A man who loves to attack a scrum, even when it's all put in and the balls are solid on the tight head side. He still likes to go for it as opposite man, just to get one up, and I love him for that. Other side of the tight heads, Can't go anywhere without Dougie Candlish because he's a great guy. Stampy, we miss it loads. He was one of the guys who kind of was on the other side of my scrum in my first couple of Northern Ones games. Great guy to have around the pitch. Great guy to have around not on the pitch as well. So yeah, I'm going to go, Big John and Stampy. Hooker, I don't know, which skill set do I go for? Do I go with the guys who want to come for a beer afterwards? Do I want the small, agile ones who can throw it around? Or do I just want, or should I just go for like the heaviest Northern front row I can go for? And I know he played a lot of back row, but it's hard to leave Jeremy out of the conversation sometimes. Tommy Horton, if he can stop being allergic to grass or injuring various body parts for the entire match. Who else can I throw in here? I'll bring Sutherland. Sutherland hasn't had a mention yet. Let's bring Andy Sutherland. He can throw the ball. He's not scared of contact.
Excellent. You've obviously kind of put yourself in the second row. Do you have? We actually, I think we did this with Ben. So we'll carry on through the pack, and we'll get you to name your favourite Northern pack of all time. So you've got your front three there. You're in the second row in one berth. Who's your other second row and your back row?
Cool. Well, obviously, you're going to need some kind of line-out option, which is obviously my downfall as a second row. You need someone you can actually pick up. Who do I like left in the second row? You see, I had a little think about the front row options. I hadn't actually thought about the rest of the pack for this question.
Fair enough. I think Michael actually likes to ask usually like rugby influencers. So if there was a professional player that you always sort of looked up to, or I wish I could do that sort of thing.
Well, being a couple of years older than you boys, some of the boys I looked up to weren't even professionals yet. They were amateurs because, let's be honest, the professionals only kicked in when I was, 15 or 16 or so. So I'm going to go with someone who straddled professionalism. Former RFU president, Mr. Jason Leonard, a man who could play both sides of the scrum, solid beer monster. Didn't score as many tries as me, but he got like one in his 130 caps or something.
Silly amount of caps for a front rower, wasn't it?
It was something else. I like characters, so I'm going to go as another one for a tight. Yeah, let's go with Jason Leonard as the loose head, and for a tight head, Martin Castro Giovanni for crazy hair, big hits, bizarre banter, and go on.
I think he liked the beer as well, didn't he?
Yeah. Was it a tour in Vegas with Zlatan or something that he got in trouble for?
It was indeed a tour in Vegas with Zlatan. I'm sure that's the one with photos of him on the balcony looking very, very dishevelled, which kind of reminded me a lot of the dark photos you see from tour. Moving on, we've got two kind of final listener questions from myself. So the first one is from @Greenbank_Alke. Do you own a pair of trousers, and can you explain your love for cargo shorts?
I believe I wore trousers at last year's club dinner, so anyone who was brave enough to attend that night will testify to that. And honestly, why would you wear trousers the rest of the year? Nowhere near enough pockets. Your legs get hot, being busy all day. That's just
a good answer. And the final listener question is from @ENRFC_president. If you could be a wine, which would you be and why?
Interesting. I'm guessing where Jake's going with that question. He wants me to name some like big fat Argentinian Malbec rugby type or something. I'm almost inclined to go. It's got to be. I want to say European, but possibly, yeah, European, big character, not the most obvious answer. So I'm going to go with a Tempranillo Blanco. So a white Tempranillo, like a hearty Spanish white.
Interesting.
So I think that concludes most of our rugby questions, but we always like to ask, what are you most looking forward to when life returns to normal?
If you'd asked me this question yesterday, I would have said a good pint of cask-conditioned ale in a good pub.
Of course, you managed to source some.
Yes, as those of you on a different chat group would have noticed, I managed to pick up a flagon of cask ale from Cloisters this afternoon, so I'm 4 pints to the good, stuck into that. So honestly, I want to give my girls places to go. I want them to see their friends. I want them to be able to play and get out there. Meanwhile, at the same time, I'm on the rugby pitch now a few days afterwards. That's my scenario.
Well
done. So I think, unless we've missed anything, Michael, I think we'll do a wee round-up.
Yeah, I was going to quickly chime in, obviously, with your, obviously with your business at the moment, and you just mentioned your love of beer in general over the last half an hour. We felt it wouldn't be appropriate in this time of supply and demand if we didn't, maybe sparking up the end of this call a wee bit and ask you to neck your pint with us. Do you have a beer nearby that you can do that with?
Just finished it. Can you pause for 1 minute as I get a refill?
Oh, we can do. Yeah, we're not as fussy as.
Well done, Kit. So you've managed to find one there. What have you got?
I've elected to go for another bunker classic, the Williams Brothers 7 Giraffes.
Very nice.
Is he frozen?
Oh. So next time on the Cockerel cast, we'll be speaking to former president, former player, former pretty much everything, Joe Smith. So get your listener questions into us. But for now, Kit, thanks for joining us on the show and for your sterling work on stocking up so many Northerners' fridges. Stay safe, and we hope it's not too long before we see each other around the bunker.
Indeed. Well said.
Cheers.
Cheers, Kit.
Cheers, boys.